another journey, and today's journey is going to be from a graduate from Antioch University with a master's degree in psychology and counselling, and that was way back in 1989, and I was only 6 years old at the time. And this person also co-directed a sexual abuse treatment program called Parents United in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 1991, and has had a small private practice before going into private practice full-time. She has been a psychotherapist treating children, families, couples, and individual adults for 32 years, and has worked extensively with abuse and dysfunctional family dynamics, their aftermath, and some of the most important elements for healing. They have also published 2 books, which I no doubt will be told where they will be when we ask them, and they are called A Light in the Darkness and Into the Fire. And they are presently working with a professional editor on the book they have written about bringing America to therapy. They live in Taos. Now, I'm not American, so I apologize. Where's and I'm just trying to think off my top of my head. I'll ask in a minute. Anyway, mostly retired now, focusing on writing, and we're going to introduce Phyllis Leavitt. Right?
Leavitt, yeah.
Leavitt.
Thank
Welcome to the journey.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being able to talk with you today.
No worries. And as I always say, the bio will be what I just read will be written down below or, afterwards. But every journey starts somewhere. And then the joke goes, yes, we was born. And that is a long-standing joke, and you understand why it's a joke. But where does your journey begin?
Well, I think the part of my journey that I want to share today is that when I was really young, I knew I wanted to be a writer. I think that, I don't know if you're born with those inclinations sometimes, but I always wanted to be a writer. And I had no idea what I wanted to say. So, but I started writing a little bit of poetry when I was a really young teenager. And I really loved doing that. I loved words. I loved, sort of making rhythm and cadence with the words, but I really didn't know what actually, I wanted to express. But the process of trying to write poetry was fun for me and kind of really allowed me to connect to what felt like more of my essential self. So that's where the journey began that I want to share with you today. And then, what really the other important part of my journey was that I really felt like I was living kind of under a dark cloud myself, and I didn't really ever understand that. And that was as long as I can remember. I just felt alone and unlovable, even though I was in a family. I had a good education, but I always just felt like there was some darkness around me that I couldn't understand or make sense of. And so kind of from very early on, without distinguishing it, my motivation in life was to figure myself out. And so I was a kind of a very introspective person, and I didn't figure myself out. I just kind of went along in life trying to look normal and trying to achieve. And I ended up, and this was kind of in the late 60s, I ended up joining a spiritual group, and I was really seeking some answers for myself there. If I could figure myself out or figure out what I was doing here as a human being or what the purpose of human life was, I was looking in a really spiritual direction. And at a certain point, and even though I had some wonderful experiences, and I really did, I had some very profound connections to divine love, and I had some very profound moments. I would say moments, they weren't lasting, moments of real insight into, sort of a bigger picture. But my own internal world didn't change. And so at one point, and at this point I was married and I had 3 little children, I decided to go to therapy. And that was where I began to remember what happened to me when I was a kid. There was some abuse in my childhood that was very traumatic that I had buried. And that's really what the dark cloud was about. And so that started a whole journey of its own. The world of psychology was very new to me. It wasn't anything I was brought up with, but it was where I first learned that what happens in your childhood and our conditioning has everything to do with what becomes of us and our coping mechanisms, our beliefs, our feelings, the kinds of situations and people we're drawn to or not drawn to. My life began to make sense when I realized that I was suffering from buried memories of trauma, and I became a therapist, and that's where that part of the journey began. So I'll let you chime in, and if you want to ask me anything else.
You were saying about the dark cloud, and I understand how a dark cloud is when it comes to abuse, because you tend to blacken it out to not recognize it. And
That's right.
And I've always talked personally as well about myself when I do interviews, and I've spoken about this in a few of my podcasts. But the fact is, abuse is there, and I don't condone it. I don't support it, because I've been there myself. And it happened at the time where I needed to adapt to life quite quickly. I only just left home. I was 18, and I had to adapt quite quickly in a situation that I was unfamiliar with. And when I was abused, it wasn't a nice place, because I was already vulnerable, but I didn't know how to address the situation to say, stop, this is wrong. Now, I know it was wrong,
Right.
but I couldn't do anything to push that abuser away. I was abused in such a way, it left me traumatized, and it still leaves me traumatized.
Yeah.
And I'm not proud of what happened to me. I'm not proud of what he forced upon me. And, it took me 2 years to actually come out and say, this happened. And even then, police at the time, they said, if he does it, he's got to write it down. They didn't prosecute because I left it too long, but they wanted him to document if he was to have any. And I will make sure this is got the E's for explicit, but if he was to have sexual encounters.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much trauma, not only around the abuse itself, but on either not being believed or not being protected or feeling shame about what happened, even though it's not your fault. It wasn't my fault when I was a little girl, but that's not what we internalize. We internalize shame about what happened, and it's hard to talk about. And I know for me, I didn't want to be one of those people, whatever I thought one of those people was, but I was one of those people, and it had really affected my life really deeply. And so, one of the things I was touched by in one of your podcasts that I watched, where the man was talking about the motivation behind what he does now. And it made me think, the whole motivation of my life has been to figure it out, to go deep, to go inside. That's just the nature of me. And so becoming a psychotherapist was sort of a natural outcropping of that. And what happened for me, so I just followed that thread. There was no other thread to follow. And I really enjoyed working one-on-one with people. And because I was doing the work on myself, what other people had experienced that was really heavy and dark and frightening didn't frighten me, because I'd already been going through it myself. And so I think that helped bring the people toward me that were the right fit for the kind of work that I did, which I really like to do, really deep inner work with people and help people move through what I had struggled so hard. And, it was an ongoing process. It wasn't an overnight process of moving through. And then what happened for me was I sort of had this big aha, and that was that there's millions of people like me out there, whether it's sexual or physical or emotional abuse in childhood, or they're suffering from racial discrimination or the after effects of war or poverty or sexism. People are suffering from all kinds of trauma all over the world, and most people are not getting help. I was fortunate that I was in a place in life where I could get help. And I got a lot of help over many years. And I'm really grateful for that. But it dawned on me that we have a world full of traumatized people that are getting no help. And they're suffering the after effects of abuse like I was, and some of them in much worse ways than I was. Like, I think I'm a fortunate one in that I mostly acted in on myself. I just, had a lot of self-criticism, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of, don't talk, don't share, don't be seen, hide. But a lot of people's after effect of abuse is not just passivity or learned helplessness, which is sometimes what happens. You're overpowered. So you actually learn to be helpless. And that was part of what happened to me as well. But some people become the abuser. That's the after effect for them. They identify with the aggression. They don't want to feel overpowered, and they identify with aggression in themselves and with people who are aggressive. And so that aha led to where my current book is. And that is, I'm writing a book now called America in Therapy, or some version of that title. I haven't totally landed on it yet, but it's about bringing our country to therapy. Because a lot of the ways, what I see is that a lot of the ways that are causing people to feel traumatized are coming down from the top. They're institutionalized forms of abuse, whether it's police violence against Black people, or the sexism that still is rampant in our country, where we have not passed the ERA, which is the Equal Rights Amendment, which would guarantee women equal pay for equal work that men do. That's astonishing in our country, that women are not treated equally. There's not that kind of justice. So there's sort of abuse coming down from the top, whether it's putting immigrant children in cages, or the resistance to raising the minimum wage, or the inordinate number of people of color being put in jail as opposed to people who are white. I mean, it's rampant. And so my thought was, we're seeing the same dynamics of abuse that we see in families happening, coming down from the top in our country. And that psychology really holds some of the answers. If I could find healing, if I had the safety to go down deep into the roots of the violence that I experienced and come out the other side, then our country can do that too. If we want to, if we're committed to it, if we want to use some of the skills that we already know from the field of psychotherapy that we could use on a national level. What if we had a mediator in Congress that was actually whose official job was to help opposing parties talk and listen to each other with respect and openness, rather than infighting and this huge partisan divide? What if we had that as part of our government? So that's where my book came from. It came right from my personal experience, to realizing I'm not alone, to realizing these dynamics are rampant in our society. And we do have the tools to stop this if we want to use them. And that's really what my book is devoted to.
And you talk about the divide wherever you are in the world. There is a big divide, in UK, there's a big divide, America especially, but UK is not far behind. And I just, I try and keep it political free if I can, but I don't mind discussing it because it is a subject. But the fact is, this divide will not ever go away. It always will be there. Whoever is in charge or whoever is leading it, it always will be physically there. And I, like you said, if there is a mediator, fine. It's got to be impartial. But the problem is, impartiality doesn't come into it because they get influenced. And then it goes into the scenario of bribery, and it is like a little thing under the table, do this, and
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And I think that, opposition is part of human nature. We disagree with each other. It is just part of human nature. I think the argument that I have, or the point that I'm trying to make, is like if we just go back to like individual therapy, when a couple comes to therapy, for instance, they want to heal the relationship because the fighting or the affairs or the anger or the acting out is hurting them. They're being hurt. Their children are being hurt. So they have a motivation to come to therapy. And the idea of therapy is to help people listen to each other with some empathy, with some compassion, to listen to each other the way that they actually want to be heard by the other person. And this is a skill we can learn. Will we always ever agree? No. I don't think that's possible for human beings, but we don't have to agree. We just have to agree not to act out on each other when we don't agree. And for families that come to get out of the war that they're in with each other, they can learn those skills, or they can learn to separate and end the marriage peacefully without, taking somebody to the cleaners or trying to steal the kids or slitting their tires or, acting out on the person that they feel hurt by or abandoned by. And my contention is that we can learn to do that as a country. We don't have to disagree. I mean, we don't have to agree. We can learn the skills of peaceful conflict resolution if we have the motivation. A fighting couple has a motivation if they want to stay together. And what I'm feeling is that the overarching motivation for our country and for the human race is that the wars that we can create out of our hatred and greed and anger and racism and, religious fanaticism and all the rest, the wars that we can create with the nuclear weapons we have can destroy life. And if that isn't a motivation, I don't know what's going to be.
Yeah.
That could be our motivation. We really want to live. We want our children and our grandchildren and all future generations to inherit a habitable earth where they are welcomed. And I believe we could actually do it if we wanted to, because we do it in our individual lives. Do we do it perfectly? No. But we don't have to do it perfectly. We just have to try. That's my point.
Yeah, it's like, saying about trying if we can, and it's about a poem I heard way back. It's called "You Can If You Think You Can."
Absolutely.
And I don't know the exact words off by heart, but it's about, I can find it. But the fact is, it's not about the fastest, slowest one, the person who talks louder than the others. It's about the person who thinks they can. So it talks about the one individual. It doesn't say about a group. It says about the one person. And when I first heard that poem, it inspired me so much, because the fact was of how it stood out. How it stood out for individuality. It didn't speak about groups. Yes, it, to some people might seem as groups, but it's written as an individual, to be the only one to be proud of. And I think when I first heard it, yes, I was in school, so that was 99 I heard it, first of all. And it was just so powerful. It was that sort of impact that left me inspired to use it often, and I have used it often in certain things I've done in the past, because it is a good motivational therapy talking where people can say, yes, I can, because I believe I can.
Right. And look what you're doing. You're doing it now by having a podcast where you're actually, you just by yourself sitting there talking to people, are bringing all these different points of view and other people's experience that has helped them. You're bringing that to a large audience, and that's a powerful point. And that is also one of the things that I'm talking about in my book, which is we can all make a difference. I don't have to run for senator. I don't have to be someone who's going to clean up the water on the entire planet, and bless the people who do that. But I can do it in my own life, and we can all follow the thread of where our heart and soul takes us, and that will be our contribution to the betterment of everyone. And you're a great example of that, just what you're doing right now.
Thank you. But I found the poem now, and it's called You Can,
Okay,
and I'm going to read it because I don't mind my
great,
listeners, viewers
great.
watching, but it's a inspiring poem by C.W. Longnecker, and it's called You Can If You Think You Can, and you can tell me your thoughts afterwards. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win, but think you can't, it is almost certain you won't. If you
Mhm.
think you lose, you lost. For out into the world we find success begins with a... If you think you are outclassed, you are. You got to think high to rise. You got to be sure of yourself before you can even win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but sooner or later, the man who wins is the man who thinks he can.
That's beautiful. I love it.
But you see what I mean about individuality? It doesn't really speak bounds for groups, but because it was read in the context, it will hit individual people in so many different ways. That's my opinion anyway.
Well, I think you're right. And I also think that one person speaking that, like you reading that, one person speaking that can influence a group or another individual. Like wonderful stories that you've probably seen, or documentaries of someone who went into a school in an inner city, and they believed in the kids and they helped them form a basketball team or a rowing team, and cheered them on and held that presence of, you can do this, I believe in you, and the whole group transforms. So I think it can work on both levels.
Yeah, and when I first read it, because I actually did use it in a speech I did. I was 16. It was the first time I did a speech in front of anyone. It was,
Wow.
I was leaving school, because obviously in England you leave school at 16, and I did
Okay.
a award ceremony. I was part of it because there was two categories in the awards. There was a bronze award, which is what most students went for because it was the baseline, award. And then I was only one of two in that particular year to do silver award. So I did the
Wow.
silver award, but the fact was that there was like 60 different people, no, about 90 people in this one auditorium, if you want to call it that. And I said, I want to read this poem. I knew about it before I did it, so I knew what to
Mhm.
say. But I said, I want to read this to these people who went through what I
Wow.
did.
Wow.
And I went up there
Beautiful.
after I received my award, and I said, because I was only one, like I said, one of two to get the silver, I felt like I had to influence everyone there. And I said, I want to read this. And just, they were all joking, laughing, being noisy like teenagers are.
Right, right.
But as soon as they heard me start that poem, they just went all quiet and they listened.
See, and there was your group.
Yeah.
There was your group. Beautiful. So beautiful. Like, I think it's just that principle of, somebody lit your flame, and then you lit the wick of other people and their flame started to burn. And
Yeah.
that's the beauty of what we can do with sharing the best of ourselves with other
And
people.
and that's the purpose of the journey,
That's
because I
right.
believe, everyone's got a journey. I've always said the motto, is everyone's got a journey, everyone's got a different story to tell.
Right.
But the fact is, it's not a straight, narrow freeway. It's got the diversions, it's got the turn-offs.
Mhm.
That's the journey, not one straight road where you can go
Absolutely.
70, you know,
Sometimes you don't know where you are, right?
yeah.
You don't know
But
where you
that's
are in the journey until you,
but
right.
that's part of learning.
Yeah,
That's
totally.
part of understanding, okay, I'm here. Why am I here?
Mhm,
Because I'm
mhm,
learning. Why are you learning?
mhm.
Because I want to grow.
That's right. That's it. That's the bottom line. I want to grow. I
So
want to have a better life.
so that was before, like I said, that was before I was sexually abused. And after I was sexually abused, this was like 2 years before I was sexually abused. But, I was confident. I was
Yeah.
shy. I was
Yeah.
having troubles. But as soon as I got abused,
Yeah.
it knocked me
Yeah.
back to the stage of where I was when I was a young child, because I didn't know what to do. I was
Right.
scared.
Yeah. It's very frightening.
And like I
Very,
said, I
very
still have
frightening.
flashbacks now. I'm not saying it's intentional, because I often do push people away when They try and be affectionate, be loving, being kind, because
Mm.
I don't intentionally want to hurt them, because they support me, but I have to block up because I feel like I'm being attacked again.
Yeah.
No, I'm not
And that's
saying
what I'm talking.
I'm not saying that person's going to attack me.
I know that's a PTSD response.
Mm,
That's a traumatic response. And that's what I'm talking about, that there's millions of people like this, that don't know why they're suffering, why they do or feel the way they do. And my prayer, my hope for our country and the world is that we start putting our resources into helping people, not building bombs and not, so materially focused, but to really help people and families and address the issue of sexual and physical violence. Because this is what I've found in my practice, that most perpetrators have also been victims. So we have to stop the cycle somewhere. And
mm,
that's sometimes hard to digest, because we want to be angry at the perpetrator. But most perpetrators didn't get that way by accident.
yeah.
They had some either abuse themselves or exposure to violence, or they were conditioned to believe that was what you're supposed to do or allowed to do, or nobody ever gave them any limits and boundaries on, what they could do and what they were entitled to. And so, the whole idea is not to blame and punish. The whole idea is to stop the cycle. And yes, sometimes people need consequences for what they did and they have to be held responsible. Absolutely.
Mm. But I was just going into the future now, and you've already pretty much touched upon it. You said about breaking that cycle. Do you
Mhm.
think it will ever be achieved realistically if people put their minds to it?
Well, I think it's possible because I see it happen in individual people's lives, and a country and a government is made up of individual people. So if it's possible for individuals, it is possible for the collective. Do I see it happening tomorrow? Probably not. I think we have a lot of work to do as individuals and a country to even recognize what we're trying to heal and to find the motivation to heal it. My guess is that we have to feel it more deeply. One of the things that I talk about in my book is that we're kind of a culture that's focused on not feeling pain. And of course, no one wants to feel pain. I don't want to feel pain, but there's a certain place for pain, that pain is a motivator to actually heal. So if we were able to look at some of the emotional pain in our culture as the access to healing, rather than just numb ourselves out or distract or project it onto somebody else, um, then I think we have better access to looking for that healing in ourselves and stop projecting it onto other people, our pain onto other people. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a way that in good therapy, you can feel some of your pain. You need to. It's not like you want to be re-traumatized or go back and stay in a traumatic space. But the pain is the motivator to heal. Just like if you have, if your appendix is bursting, you don't want to numb that pain out. You want to get the appendix out.
Yeah.
Right. And that's an emotional pain is the same way. It could serve the same function if we understood that's our motivator to heal what hurt in our emotional life or our physical life or our mental life
Mm,
or our family life or our relational life or,
mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the fact is that, and I've learned this myself over the years, you got to experience the pain, not relive it, just
Right,
experience it, just
right,
experience it to help you
right.
grow, to help you learn, to help you overcome.
Mm-hmm. And my hope for our country, and it's really for the world, but I talk about America because I live in America. My hope for our country is that we can take the pain that we're experiencing seriously. Like, for instance, the mass murders that are happening on almost a daily basis sometimes. This is raw pain. The people who are doing it are in pain or they wouldn't do it.
Mm,
And the pain that they're inflicting on their innocent victims is something I don't even know if I could imagine. And so my hope is that as a country, we will take that as a sign that we need national healing. We need to focus on people. We need to take care of each other so that children who are really symptomatic are seen and helped before they go shoot up a school.
And, talking about news events, and it goes opposite of what we're talking about, but you talk about people helping each other. We've seen, as this is recorded, we've got the earthquake in Turkey.
Right.
You see the camaraderie there, you see the support there, you see the love there, because everyone's
Right.
trying to help each other.
Exactly.
And that's what I would want, as anything. Not just for rescue relief, not just for, doing the individual things. It's got to be the bigger picture. It can't be just a small, and I always see events in life as a jigsaw. You can't just be one little piece. You got to be the bigger, clearer piece,
Right.
where it makes sense of what that image is.
I totally agree with you. And it's beautiful to see how people come together in the face of an emergency. And nobody thinks about what political party or religion or race you are. We're just helping each other live, right? We're rescuing who's ever under the rubble. And that's what I'd love to see here, that we can get beyond some of the judgments, the extreme judgments we have of each other, and realize we're all in danger of extinction if we don't help the climate, if we don't pull back from our weapons, if we don't look at climate change. We're all in danger of extinction. Let's get on that boat together.
Yeah. So I know you got a website, and we're going to talk about that, and it's the best way, I assume, of people getting in contact with you. Tell us about your website and how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, thank you. My website is just my name, phyllisleavitt.com. And it's PhyllisLeavitt.com. And my phone number's on there. There's an email address, and there's also a place on the homepage where if you'd like to stay in touch with me or receive some newsletters that I'm putting out about my new book, you can just sign into the contact space on the homepage, and I would love to be in touch with you. And I'm developing a YouTube channel, and I have some things on there now, and I'll be putting all my podcasts on there, and they'll also be on my website. And I have a Facebook page and a LinkedIn account, and those are my main social media, although I do have a little bit of Instagram and Twitter, but those are not my main ones. Yeah. So mostly website, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And then the two books that I wrote, Into the Fire, and the first one was A Light in the Darkness, and the second one is Into the Fire. Those are on Amazon under my name.
Okay. One last thing. What would you say to people to give them positivity for the future?
Yeah, I think we can all make a difference. I think one loving act to a stranger, or one kind word to a friend, or pulling yourself back from an argument with a loved one and trying to listen to them makes a difference. And if you're called to something bigger, if you're called to work with climate change, or write a book, or make beautiful music or beautiful art, just follow where your own spirit calls you, because, that's what I think. We all have a gift, and I think everyone's gift is unique. So share yours, because we need it. We need everybody's gifts.
Phyllis, it's been a pleasure talking to you on the journey today.
And a pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate you, and thank you so much for having me.
I think Paul's School was a very important chapter in my life. I tend to see my life in terms of chapters, as in a story, which I guess what we're talking.
And then especially once I became a mother, I wasn't even called Amanda anymore. I was called Alessandra's mum.
To talk about one of the things you're passionate about is a dream come true. And since I found out I was autistic at the age of 29, which I feel is kind of late in life,
because my journey is one of hardship growing up.
My main mission was I wanted to not just like make it, but actually, thrive in this environment.
But it has never taken away from my will and determination.
Stoked to be on. Thanks for having me, mate. I've been the bucket list guy for about 10 years.
One day I saw a link on I think it was Facebook, and I followed the link because it resonated with me, and I ended up reading about empaths.
Now you can always edit the inappropriate stuff out.
And I'm looking at those faces, and it's making me feel very old.
I'm just finishing something, so I just wanted to be polite rather than just be abrupt.
I was born just like everyone else, and went through just a normal growing up or whatever. However each of us grows up, that's our normal, right? Because we don't know anything else. So I'm no different in that regard.
Want to be part of the journey? Why not share your journey? Follow us on Facebook, www.facebook.com/share a wise word or two.